मैडम आ गए हैं तो
सर शुरू करें क्या?
मैडम से पूछ लीजिए पहले।
Ma'am, can we start with the webinar?
We can start, yeah.
Okay, ma'am, I will start with the introduction, then I'll hand over the session to you. Namaskar and a very good evening to everyone. I hope everyone is doing well considering the pandemic situation. I'm Mehli Ghosh from the School of Nanosciences, Central University of Gujarat. Welcome you all to this webinar organized by Vigyan Gujarati Karnavati Unit in collaboration with Gujarat Technological University. In this student innovation phase, state level competition for all from the various fields is organized. Expert talk will be delivered via webinar from dignitaries on various topics. Mentoring will be provided by expert to shortlisted participants. Industrial visit will also be provided depending on the COVID situation. Also, prize money will be given for first 3 positions. Now, I would like to address a few words towards Vigyan Gujarati. Vigyan Gujarati is one of the state level organization under the umbrella of Vigyan Bharati. Vigyan Bharati initiated as the Swadeshi Science Movement in the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, by a few eminent scientists under the guidance of Professor K.I. Vasu in 1991. Vigyan Bharati has units in 22 states across the country. The main of Vigyan Bharati is to champion the cause of Bharatiya heritage with a harmonious synthesis of physical and spiritual sciences, which nourish each other and flourish together. Today, on this day of the webinar, we have Dr. Madhvi Joshi, who is the Joint Director of Gujarat Biotechnology Research Center, Department of Science and Technology, Gandhinagar, here to share her experience with us in this expert lecture. GBRC is one of the premier research institute and one of its kind institute working under the Department of Science and Technology. GBRC is playing a very important role in the current pandemic situation by being one of the very first publishers of COVID sequence from Gujarat. And they also initiated surveillance for wastewater for COVID-related epidemiology study. Currently, they are working with the industry to ramp up vaccine production in Gujarat. Now, giving a brief about Dr. Madhvi Joshi, I would here state that prior to GBRC, she served as sector specialist in Gujarat State Biotechnology Mission, Gandhinagar. She has more than 15 years of experience in research and academic field. She has published various research papers, books, and magazines. She completed her PhD in bioscience from Saurashtra University in 2011 and Masters of Science in Microbiology from Saurashtra University in 2005. To date, she received many international and national grants for various research projects. She also guided many PhD and MPhil students successfully. Her area of expertise includes but not limited to genomics, metagenomics, and transcriptome studies. She completed a total of 29 sequencing projects. And Dr. Madhvi Joshi is one of the key people of GBRC and also one of the members of advisory committee to CM of Gujarat to prepare a strategy against the COVID pandemic. So today's topic of discussion will be COVID-19 genomics, study of the whole genome of COVID-19. We welcome you, ma'am. And to all the participants, I will say that please use the chat box option to ask a question during the session, which will be answered after the session. Now I am handing over the session to Dr. Madhvi Joshi. I request you to deliver your speech, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mihali and Vigyan Gurjari for providing me this opportunity to interact with the young minds in science for my research that we have conducted in GBRC for the COVID. I hope the screen is visible and is in presentation mode.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So, as Nehali mentioned, that GBRC is working as an autonomous society under Department of Science and Technology, Government of Gujarat. And the core objective of our research institute is to develop into a translational research institute which provides a solution to any issues that we encounter in society with the help of biotechnology. And we work in almost every domain of biotechnology, including healthcare, agriculture, environment, so on and so forth. So last year, when we had starting of the COVID pandemic, I still remember there was a first meeting at a very high level in the government where they wanted to know what GBRC can contribute into. And owing to our strength into genomics, one of the area that we suggested state government is to do the COVID whole genome sequencing, and which we did way back in April 17, where we released the first SARS-CoV-2 genome sequence from Gujarat. And at that time, it was the second lab in India after NIV to release the whole genome sequence of a SARS-CoV-2. So since then, we have been actively engaged in the COVID genomics from the clinical patients as well as from the environmental samples. So today I would be just sharing some of the glimpse of what are the whole genome sequencing activities which are done globally in India and locally here in GBRC for SARS-CoV-2 genome. So we all know that as on 2nd June, more than 170 million confirmed cases of the COVID are reported with almost 3.6 million deaths as per the WHO record. And although there are 1.5 billion vaccine doses have been administered, but the speed of vaccination in the developing countries and LMICs are very, very less. 1.8 million SARS-CoV-2 genomes have been sequenced till 3rd June, and they are deposited on GUICID. So GUICID is a global initiative on depositing the flu whole genomes, and SARS-CoV-2 also kind of a very near organism to this. The sequences are being deposited there. So as you can see that this is one of the largest, genome sequencing drive, as you can say, of any organism, which has been globally initiated by various agencies across globe. Asia has deposited around 1 lakh sequences. And from India, if you see INSACOG, which is an Indian consortia for SARS-CoV-2 genome sequencing, initiated by DBT ICMR, they have deposited around 18,290 sequences. And if you talk about GBRC, so far we have deposited more than 1,100 genomes, and it is still continuing. Now, all of you would have a question that why you need to do a lot of sequencing of organism, because in some of the bacterial diseases, we have only few reference genomes to work on, wherein in COVID, if you would see almost 1.8 million sequences are deposited globally. So the major role of the genome sequencing lies in the tracking, tracing, and the epidemiological studies of the pathogen. It also throws light on the evolution and the science-based policy decision making for handling the pandemic condition like this, which is the COVID-19. So as you know that the human coronavirus, which is a novel coronavirus, is entering into a host through a receptor called as ACE2, and the viral RNA is released, and then that it is undergoing the RNA replication and synthesis of the plus strand, which results into various structural and functional proteins, which is using our cellular machinery, and with that it is further assembling and released into the host. So if you look at the existing pathogens, where we know that the R naught, which is an ability of transmitting disease from one healthy individual to another susceptible individual has been very, very high in case of MERS and SARS. But in case of SARS-CoV-2, which is a novel coronavirus disease, it is estimated somewhere near 3 to 4. So it doesn't have that high transmissibility. But if you see that the mortality is also relatively very low. But if you would observe very carefully, you know, that this disease has been changing its variations so fast that there are so many variants which are emerging out of it. And what happens is that when you talk about our body's immune response, it identified certain epitopes. And on the basis of those epitopes, what it is doing is that it is neutralizing that pathogen when it encounters second time. Now, in this case, there is a very strong theory of immune escape, which we all have been listening. So last year also, Liu Zhang et al., they published that at 614 position from D to G, you know, that is resulting, which is spike protein. So this is resulting into the changes, which is creating a strain which is able to show some of the immune escape. So, as you know that all the viruses, for example, this is COVID-19, but there are so many other viruses. So once they are entering the host and they are making its replication and making various copies, every time when it uses the host machinery at a very fast pace, so errors are there. And these errors, we record it in form of mutations. Now, based on these mutations, you know, some of the strains are getting more adaptive because they are able to have either the more transmissibility or more reproducibility in the host. So this one or the more mutation which are gathered in a virus, which either is a preferring to virus or if it is preferring to host, but a set of mutation when it is observed, we call it as a variant of that particular virus. So last year, the first variant that we discussed was 614D2G mutation. Now, in typical viral infection, what you have is that you have a spread of virus from one infected individual to several of them based on its R0 value, that is its ability to transmit it from one person to the another person. Then once you have the viral replication, usually there is a phase which is not able to detect any clinical symptoms. And usually after that, the copy of virus increases in the body. So typically after 3 to 7 days of symptoms, you observe the mild to moderate to severe clinical signs of having a disease. And then once you cross the viremia stage, along with the medication, along with your natural immunity, you have a slow decline of the infection. Now, during this period, your body is able to act with this pathogen, and then based on the interaction of the host and pathogen, either you end up having a mild to asymptomatic disease or to moderate or a severe disease. So let us look at the SARS-CoV-2. There are a couple of very important mutations which we have observed over a period of time. And on the global data sets like GuySed and NextStrain, if you are able to visualize, they will tell you which are the rapidly mutated regions of this particular virus. Here in this case, we have some of the major changes which are observed in the spike protein. And the spike protein, as you know now, that it is divided into two, S1 and S2, and there is a furin cleavage site over here. And it is then in turn binding into your ACE2 receptor, which is then resulting into the infection. So if you can see here that over a period, there are certain emerging variants which have shown some of the changes in the spike protein. For example, B1.17, which previously we were knowing it as a UK variant. Now recently WHO has renamed all these variants to alpha, beta, gamma, delta, like that. So there is this deletion of 6970 as well as a deletion of 144 and 45 in the S1 region, along with some of the changes at 484, 501 and 614D2G. Now, this is reported in 75 countries. The reports have shown the higher transmissibility. The efficacy of the vaccine also gets reduced and the virulence gets increased. Similarly, B1.351 also first reported in Brazil. You can see that it is known to have the higher transmissibility and the efficiency towards the vaccine has been reduced, also reported in 32 plus countries. So this is a rapidly changing virus that we are observing. So what happens is, that the major variants, these are primarily the result of the selective pressure and the adaptation, because virus also wants to live and so does the host. Now, as I told you that out of these error-prone mutations, the changes which are observed in a virus, some of the changes are able to sustain virus because they are affecting the host in the adverse way. And that is how, they develop into various variants. Now, WHO in this case has classified the variants into the categories. So they say variants of concern, basically the strain which is having the set of mutations with the evidence of its impact on diagnostic either or a treatment or a vaccine efficiency. They are widespread and they are also having interference with the diagnostic test targets. There are the evidences of the substantially increased resistance to one or the more class of therapies. Also, the significant decrease in the neutralization of the antibodies and the evidence of the reduced vaccine induced protection from the severe diseases, as well as the transmissibility and disease severity. So these are some of the parameters on the basis of which a VOC or a variant of concern is identified. And let us look at, some of the major variant of concerns which are observed in SARS-CoV-2. So as you can see, this is ORF1A and ORF1B, which is one of the major sequences. So out of 30,000 odd nucleotides of a SARS-CoV-2 genome, ORF1AB is comprising of more than 75 to 80% of the genome. And as you can see that there are some of the persistent changes which have been reported in terms of its prevalence in various mutations. And in spike, as we discussed, recently, as you can see in India also, we observed some of the variant which were first reported here in early December 2020, that is 617, and then it emerged into 617.1 and 617.2 and 617.3. And these are the set of mutations with their frequencies. So again, these are the other regions like nucleocapsid, envelope, membrane protein, and functional proteins like ORF8 and ORF7A. So let us talk, that any variant, before becoming the variant of concern, they become the variant of interest, because when you are sequencing a particular virus for very high depth, in very high numbers from across globe, you are able to capture the mutation prone area. So the variant with a specific genetic marker that have been associated with the changes to either probably receptor binding or the binding with the neutralizing antibodies. So they are, first identified, and their attributes are studied with specific gene markers about their transmission, diagnosis, or therapeutic immune response. And once they demonstrate its association with the clinical outputs, or maybe the cases or the unique outbreak in the clusters, then the variant of interest is further studied and declared as a variant of concern. So, as I told you, these are some of the Pango lineages. B1.1.7 is a UK strain. It showed 50% more transmissibility. It was also linked with the severity based on the higher hospitalizations and the case fatality which was observed in UK. Although it had a very low impact on the neutralization by some of the monoclonal antibody therapeutics, which are approved by European Union emergency uses, and it had a minimal impact on the neutralization by convalescent and post-vaccination sera. But as you increase on this table, you are also able to see that these variants who have been showing some of the adaptiveness in those particular regions, they have not limited to those area, but those variants, because of the movement of the people from one place to the another place. And we know that last year it was thought to have this particular SARS-CoV-2 infection out of the aerosol. This time there are very strong evidences to link its transmission, which is an airborne transmission. So these variants have then, reached various countries, and they have shown the disease progression there. These are some of the other variant of interest which were reported in 2020. That is 562 and 525, which were first reported in USA. But they never was elevated to the variant of concern. Now, this is a latest classification where WHO renamed this B1 1.7 to alpha, the Brazilian variant 351 to beta, the P1 to gamma, and B1 617.2 to delta. So WHO has also reported some of the variant of interest, and they have labeled it as an epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, and kappa. These are some of them. And as you can see that Indian origin 2 variants, that is 617.2, which has now become VOC, and 617.1, which has become the kappa. So these are the global sequences. As I told you, almost 1.8 million sequences, which are sequenced over. They have now changed into various clades, and these clades are defined by some of the classical mutations. As you can see that when initially originated, it was primarily the V and the S. So there were only 2 strains. Then the L came into the picture, and then L became into the V and G. And the G clade has evolved into GR, GH, and GV. And GR further evolved into GRY. So here I have already mentioned, this is also available on GuySed, the defining mutations of a particular clade. And as you can see that by now, majority of the sequences are from the GRY clades. So again, if you would see the time scale prevalence of some of the lineages, as you can see that majority of them sequenced ones are from B1.1.7, which is a UK variant, and then South African and Brazilian variant, and Indian variant, which we are able to see over a time scale. But this report is a global picture. If you look at the scenario of the Guy-Sted clades in India, based on the data of INSACOG, so there are 18,242 sequences, and from that, as you can see, most of the sequences, they belong to the clade G, followed by GR and GH, and there are very few reports of GRY, GVL, and V. If you look about the lineages, the top lineage which has been observed in India around more than 2,500 sequences, that is from 617.2, followed by B1 and 617.1 and all other variants. So this is how, as you will see, the lineages have progressed over a period of pandemic from March 20 to May 21. And as you can see that the brown one is the African variant, the red one is the 617.2, and how it is taking over the wave that we are recently seeing in India. Similarly, as on 3rd June, if you look at the Gujarat data, around 1100 genomes. So majority of the sequences in Gujarat are now from 617.2, which is thought to be the dominant lineage during the second wave that we observed in Gujarat. The virus is mutating at a very fast pace. But if you would look at the next strain data and the predictions last year, so the substitution rate was estimated to be somewhere nearly 23 to 24, which is now, as you can see, has reached to 26 substitutions per year. This is how, you know, the virus is changing its positions and various lineages. So if you look at the Indian variant, that is 617, and its associates like 617.123 and the triple mutant, although not a right terminology, but 618. So you see that the majority of sequences are from 617.1. And 617.2 is also very clearly dominating with a very few original sequences of 617, the 3 and 618. These are some of the mutations which are defining the variation. So as you can see that ORF1ab is having the change in the nucleotides as well as the amino acid, including spike protein, ORF3a and ORF7a. Now these are the table which are defining specific mutations between these three clades. But let me tell you, you know, one thing, that when we are talking about the sublineages of 617, the 617 has further changed into 3 subtypes, that is 1, 2, and 3. Now you look at the founder mutation, that is 484 E2Q. This is glutamic acid to glutamine. This substitution is conferring the stronger binding potential with the human ACE2 receptors, as well as it has an ability to evade the host immune system. Similarly, the 452 L2R, which is a leucine to arginine, this also is conferring the stronger affinity of this mutant of the spike protein with the ACE2 receptor and the decreased recognition ability by our immune system. The P681R, which is a mutation at the 681 amino acid, proline to arginine. So according to William Heslin, it may boost a cell level infectivity of the variant by facilitating the furin cleavage site at S1, S2 junction, which is a very near mutation at a junction site. And as you know that this is 617, but it has further evolved into 3 variants. And these variants are also reported in other countries. Like as you can see that 617.2, which has also been reported in UK. Now just don't go by the higher number, you know. Here you may see that the highest number have been reported in UK and then in India. But let me tell you, I mean, UK is doing the most sequencing initiative by the COG UK. And so far, they have sequenced more than 10 lakh genomes of SARS-CoV-2 versus the 18,000 released sequence from India. So as you would see that if you look at the proportion of the lineage present and just multiply it with the fold of mutation that has been present in the sequences, you would observe that it is at a very high percent prevalent in India. So similarly, if you look at the 6172 lineage, which is almost around 2544 sequences, so they are highest in Maharashtra, followed by Telangana, Gujarat, AP, and Karnataka. Again, these are based on the sequencing results. So it does not reflect on the epidemiological presence of these lineages in the various parts of the country. If you look at the mutations which are in addition to 617, in point 2, you have got some of the peculiar mutations, that is deletion of 6 nucleotides, which is corresponding to 2 amino acids in the spike region as well as in the ORF8. Now, so this is the mutation. As you can see at the nucleotide position 22029, there is a deletion of 6 amino acids, which is resulting into glutamic 146 to arginine and 158 deletion. And in ORF8 also, you are able to observe this deletion of 6 nucleotides. Now let us understand what are the implications of this deletion as per the knowledge that we have on the SARS-CoV-2 so far. That if you look at the change in the virus spike protein, this is a wild type protein and this is a mutant. So one group in GBRC, specifically Army and her colleagues, they are working on what are the implications in this mutations in the structure of a spike protein. So as you can see here, the cyan and the magenta, these are representing into, so magenta is a wild type and cyan is a mutant protein. And they are, the mutation is present in the N-terminal domain of the spike protein. Now, this N-terminal domain is also binding with the neutralizing antibodies. And as you can see that when the mutation is taking place, it is lowering the binding. And hence, this mutation is enhancing the virulence by less interaction with the neutralizing antibody, because N-terminal domain is the domain which is binding with the neutralizing antibodies. If you look at the ORF8, there are reports not only in SARS but also in MERS and other similar group of viruses where this ORF8 is interacting with the MHC complex, and it is down-regulating the major histocompatibility complex. Now, this mutation present over here is allowing actually the more presentation, because it is binding stronger, it is showing the more interaction with the antigen presenting cell, and hence they are able to have the better response. So these are some of the findings. Other than that, so this is from the clinical patients, the genome sequencing. We are also involved into the wastewater based epidemiology. So what we are doing is we are collecting samples from various locations, and then those are able to, they are subjected to RNA extraction, and then, we are able to identify the SARS-CoV-2 genes from this. So primary objective of the wastewater-based epidemiology is that there is a incubation period of any viral disease. But as soon as a virus is making entry in the body, the ACE2 receptors are also present in the intestine of human being, and they are able to get excreted through the stool samples, and hence they are reaching the wastewater treatment plant through a sewage system. Once we are able to do collection of the samples from there, we are able to detect not only the virus and its presence, but we are also able to detect variants. So way before clinically any variant starts to appear, we would be able to capture using the wastewater-based epidemiology that which are the common mutations which are changing. So as you can see that this is the data which we have collected from 10 different sewage pumping stations, including, one sample from the Sabarmati River over a period from September to April. And as you can see that they are clearly between 7 to 10 days before able to indicate when the next peak is going to come. So this is a very strong tool. We are also advocating this tool for the policymakers for establishing it as a regular tool in predicting the pandemic waves from across various places. This is not only done here, but worldwide. Now people have started understanding and accepting the value of the wastewater-based epidemiology. So what is done here is, the sample from the sewage is collected. It is first centrifuged to remove the debris. Then the supernatant is collected, which is filtered from 0.22 micron filter. And then it is subjected to PEG precipitation. This is PEG 8000 along with the NaCl, and it is incubated at a lower temperature overnight. And then it is further centrifuged at 9000 G or 14,000 RPM. And then whatever the pellet is collected, that pellet is subjected to RNA extraction. And then that RNA is further used for detecting SARS-CoV-2 using digital PCR or using maybe real-time PCR. So as I shown you that this is the data which we have now already published in collaboration with our collaborator, Dr. Manish from IIT Gandhinagar, that we are clearly able to get a time of 2 weeks when the next peak is going to come. So this is the increased concentration that we reported in our wastewater-based epidemiology versus this was the actual peak that we observed post-Diwali. So this is a very strong tool and it has a very huge implications. We also extended this work to the next generation sequencing. So as you can see that we had sequenced some samples from September from the Sabarmati River, and Vinzol is in name of the area. So we have collected the sample of November and February, and we subjected it to the whole genome sequencing. And as you can see that almost we are able to get the whole genome. So here we have only 62% uniformity, but as you can see that 92% uniformity of the genome could be assembled from a wastewater. And the striking slide that I just wanted to highlight over here is that we are able to detect the frequency of the 617.2 almost at a 60% from the wastewater. And this is a very strong sign that you are able to capture all the variants way before they start appearing into the clinical manifestations using the wastewater-based screening. So these are further, the data which are present on the GISAID from other environmental sites and how they have detected various variants of concern. So Australia has been very aggressive on doing the wastewater-based epidemiology as well as the environmental sequencing of SARS-CoV-2. And as we have seen that, they are able to have a very good timeline on how to take up the further peak and how to handle it. So this is certainly a very good tool. These are some of our publications. They are also available on our COVID resource, which is covid.gbrc.org.in. All the sequences that we have done so far, they are also present in the public domain. So I think all those who are interested can have a look at it. And we would be happy to interact with anybody who wants to work with it. At last, I just want to thank my entire team, especially Director Professor Chaitanya Joshi and the dedicated team of the research fellows who have put in a lot of hard work in what work so far we have been able to do. They've made a significant contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an informative talk. It was wonderful hearing from you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me once again. Also to Dr. Prashant Kunjadia, who has been pioneer in organizing this type of sessions. I think this is a very nice initiative of Vigyan Gurjari.
Thank you, madam.
Ma'am, there are a few questions which the participants have asked during the session. Ma'am, the first one is there any role of human interference in mutation of this virus?
So certainly, when a virus is changing, it is a host factor also which is playing a role, because as virus wants to survive, the host also wants to survive. For the host interaction, I did not show it here, but we have also conducted another small piece of work where we have tried and understand the role of host factors in the disease severity and the final outcome of the patient. And very soon we are going to publish that paper. It is also available on the archives, review archives, and our COVID resource.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. The next question that is here is how sequencing data helps to control pandemic?
So as I tell you in the beginning, when you are sequencing the virus, you are also able to know how it is changing. Now, those changes have implications on its transmissibility, very important implications on the vaccination strategy, as well as the diagnostics. So some of the mutations, which as you can see in the spike protein, they have led to change in the diagnostic strategy by many of the key RT-PCR diagnostic manufacturers. So those mutations, if they are there in the probe binding site, you will not be able to detect those variants. So although they are there, but you will not be able to detect them. So diagnostic is one. Even on the GUISAID website, if you would see, they will also show along with the genome what are the probe and primer binding sites where these mutations are playing a role. Similarly, as I mentioned with the example of 617.2 and its mutation, when they are escaping our immune system and they are not going to bind with the neutralizing antibody, the classical mRNA based vaccines which we used, suppose from the first Wuhan strain, those needs to be changed over a period of time. So certainly it has implication. Not only that, when you have the sequencing data, what you are also able to do further to this is you are able to establish from where it came and how your pandemic is progressing. So this type of work is very, very essential, and this information only can be assessed by the genome sequencing.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, is there any mapping of statin and relevant symptoms available?
Pardon? Can you please repeat your question?
Ma'am, they have asked a question that is there any mapping of statin and relevant symptoms available?
I am not aware about it.
Ma'am, how Ayurveda intervention can lead to more immunity to people who follow it?
So, this is a good question. I think we recently published also one paper, which is primarily based on in silico studies, where based on the Ayush recommendations, we had taken some of the compounds, around 150 compounds, which are the active compounds from different plants. And we had studied their interactions with SARS-CoV-2 proteins. And we have found out that Yashti Madhu or Glycyrrhiza gabra, it has got lichuric acid, licorice, and some of the other important compounds which are able to neutralize the proteins, and they are able to show or demonstrate good in silico activity against SARS-CoV-2. Similarly, Herde, tercebuline is the compound, which is able to show good activity. So certainly, when we do not have any classified drug for the virus like this, which is a very novel and the world doesn't have any clue about how to handle it, you have to have, the various repurposing, not only, I mean, allopathy has also done the same thing. They have also repurposed several drugs for the usage in SARS-CoV-2. We have also tested these polyherbal formulations and the Ayurvedic formulations, and they've shown to have a very good impact on the disease.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, the last question, okay. Dr. Prashant Kunjaria is asking that seeing current conspiracy between allopathy and Ayurveda, what message you give?
So this is kind of not a really scientific question, but I'll still try to address, and please consider it as my personal view. See, any science, whether it is Ayurveda, allopathy, homeopathy, or Unani medicines, they have been practiced over a period of time with some of the systematic documentations. And we need to understand the base of all these sciences. For example, in allopathy, we always treat symptoms, wherein if you look at the Ayurveda or allopathy or other ancient sciences, they are treating not only the symptoms, but they are treating the cause, the root cause. And we need to, rather than giving, which is a better one and which is not a better one, we have to have appreciation for all the sciences. We cannot say that this science is better and that science is not. But certainly, when we have shown the proof that all other alternative medicines are also proven to be working better when it comes to the treatment of SARS-CoV-2, I think it is more about having the acceptance of those treatments when you are yourself encountering that disease.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, the last one. Okay, Dr. Prashant Kunjaria is asking why GBRC is not conducting human trials to prove our Ayurveda science is right as far as treatment is concerned, as we listen a lot from Ayurveda practitioners.
Yeah, so Dr. Prashant, what we have done is an in silico studies, and that also first needs to be validated on some of the biosafety level 3 labs, where we are able to demonstrate that these in silico results are showing better results in the cell lines. compared to the traditional drugs. That would be, the strong point in taking these compounds to clinical trials. So certainly once we cross that bridge, we would like to take this work forward even up to the clinic. Why not?
He's asking cell line studies.
So that is what I said, the cell line studies needs to be conducted in BSL-3 environment, and currently GBRC has only up to BSL-2 lab environment. So certainly the studies can be undertaken, and if these drugs are showing a potential in the cell line studies, they can be immediately taken for preclinical and clinical trials.
Mehali madam,
Yes, sir.
Madhvi madam, actually we had one talk of Vaidya Mahendra Singh Sarvaiya ji in Bhavnagar unit, and he is having his clinic in Talaja, where he treated more than 5,000 patients in the Ayurveda OPD, and they have some another name, I forgot it, but they have their corona care center also where they have treated. So he suggested few things, I exactly forgot, but throughout Gujarat, we have a very good Ayurveda means Vaidyas, those who are doing, and they have their nice means community also, where they are doing. So at least initially, before planning these experiments or study, at least some important inputs can be taken from these people. So you can have a better idea what to do and what not to do to actually prove, because they have done all the things on live, means human samples. So
See, you would have also seen the work which is now being done by Gujarat University, the
yes,
team of Professor Rakesh Rawal. So they are also working in close collaboration with some Ayurvedic practitioners,
yes,
and their drug has already reached phase 3 trial.
yeah. Junagadh, Vaidya from Junagadh, I know him. Yeah.
Yeah. So certainly, I mean, those kind of work can be taken up, but I said that at present the limitation is availability of BSL-3, which would be soon overcome maybe in a year or so
Yeah.
at GBRC. Yeah.
And one another thing, madam, that okay, right now we are having a pandemic of COVID-19, and we are always thinking right now in that direction. But there are many other diseases also, and for treatment there are Ayurveda therapy available. Like, because we know, we have everybody, like those who have COVID, they have felt that lot of economic losses are also there. So just to do we means in that direction only we can have some guideline or something by doing brainstorming amongst the allopathic doctor, Ayurveda doctor, and scientists like us can be having some. So that kind of session will be there. So something will come out which is good for for all people. And we are having right now young minds. So as you have told a lot of thing about Ayurveda and allopathy, so they will also come to know, so they will also follow some of the things. This is just suggestion to you, to you, madam.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. I can see there are a few more questions in the chat box, but I would like to say to all the participants that we can arrange another session on another day, and we can ask ma'am to give another lecture that day about this topic, since so many of them are interested in but in this particular topic.
No issue, anytime.
Ma'am, can we move towards the vote of thanks?
Yeah, sure.
It's an honor to have been asked to offer a vote of thanks on today's webinar, where Dr. Madhvi Joshi, Joint Director of Gujarat Biotechnology Research Center, Department of Science and Technology, Gandhinagar, is here with us. On behalf of the entire management group, I, Meheli Ghosh, express gratitude to Dr. Madhvi Joshi for sharing her graceful words with us in today's expert talk. It has been our tribute to host her and the audience at the meeting. I am thankful to all the participants for attending the webinar. I am very thankful to the Vigyan Gurjari, Gujarat Technological University, and all the event partners, faculties, and students for supporting this webinar and making it a success. Now let me call it the Fraternity of Basic Sciences here together, and on my behalf extend a very hearty vote of thanks to Dr. Madhvi Joshi for sparing some time for this webinar and making her presence here. It has remained a profound pleasure, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you once again, Maheli, Dr. Prashant, and the entire team of Vigyan Gurjari for inviting me and giving this opportunity to share the part of the research work which is done at GBRC with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you so much, ma'am.